Hey again, welcome to this episode. I'm still, as always, Jack Smith, and Bob is still here. Sorry, Bob.
And I'm still here as well,
You're
indeed.
still here as
I'm
well.
Bob.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, man. Bob, you're here so much, people will think we're married.
We might be.
Crap.
Or at least we might as well be.
We might, we might as well be, but remember, you get to keep the dog, I get to keep the cat.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I'm more of a dog person anyway, so perfect for me.
No, we agree too much, we cannot be married.
That's true as well.
Legal counseling, marriage counseling with Jack Smith, episode 3, welcome. Anyway, let's see. So this episode, I am giving the honors to Bob, who also has the horror stories to go about. So, my dear friend, it's all yours.
Thank you. So, some of you might know, others won't. My experience in IT is much more around applications, application management, application development, application landscape. All of those things. So it'll be a bit more focused in that direction than the usual infrastructure stuff.
You mean no power cables to unplug? What have we come to?
Exactly,
no.
Indeed. So this story happened, let me think, 10, 15 years ago now. Damn, I'm getting old.
10, 15 years ago. So the Facebook was new. MySpace was dying.
Exactly. The iPhones were becoming popular, and the smart tablets were launched 1 or 2 years before.
Twitter was still Twitter.
Twitter was still Twitter.
Those days.
Those days, indeed. Yeah. So,
good.
Just to sketch it, it was around that period, and of course, if you were a big multinational, like the company I was at that particular moment working for, you had to start using smartphones and tablets in everything that was client-facing.
Was this after we all needed a BlackBerry with a BlackBerry server?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
The Blackberries were dying out slowly. They were still there.
And the first Android thingies came up. Gotcha. Okay.
Exactly. So most companies still had Blackberries because their senior people really liked them. Mm-hmm. But the younger generations were less addicted to the Crackberries, and they saw the benefits of proper applications, having a proper screen, and all of those things. So that's that time period.
Awesome sauce. Yes.
So I was working for a company in the consumer market, pharmaceutical. Very big company. Presence, proper global presence, and I was working for the EMEA region. For those who don't know, European, Middle East, and Africa. That's essentially that region, and it was a big multinational. So of course their headquarters are somewhere in the US, and they had a great idea. They had a great idea that they have a sales program where they have sales material that they use to go and visit their existing customers or their prospects, and they show all the details about their products to those customers. And essentially it was being done on a laptop, but as some people might know, especially if you're in the pharmaceutical business, the coverage in hospitals is spotty at best. Mm-hmm. If you're not on the internal Wi-Fi, then you have big problems in actually connecting to anything data-wise.
And even 15 years ago, that was horrible. You would walk into a hospital and you would just have no bars left. Yeah,
exactly. And what happened? They usually presented their products to the doctors. Doctors are very heavily. They are usually on a time crunch, so they had. Mm-hmm. maybe a quarter of an hour to do a presentation. And if you do that on a laptop and the program actually wants to make a connection before actually showing things, yeah, that means that quite often they just had to revert back to the paper brochures.
They would carry with them.
Exactly, which meant that then after the sales, after the sales pitch, the salesperson had to do administration when they were back home because the computer didn't log anything. As you can imagine, we all love to do administration, and commercial peoples are not any different. So for the company, it was a huge problem. They had their sales material, they had their brochures, they had whatnot, but they had zero idea whether it was actually working, whether the brochures were better or worse in the next iteration. They didn't have any feeling. So somebody in the US came up with the good idea, and honestly, I genuinely mean that, a good idea. Let's use tablets. Let's use tablets with local storage, so we have all the material digitally on those devices. We can see which slides are actually being used more, which slides are skipped over. We can link all the visits, and all the administrative part is done automatically by an application, so you know it's accurate and you can actually use it.
Yeah, because that was a question that popped up in my mind, was like, so why don't you use local storage if you know that your network connection is going to be so bad? And then that's, oh yeah, you put it locally on a tablet with an app and just go.
Exactly.
So a good management decision.
Exactly, a great management
Damn.
decision. Yeah.
Well done.
Look, they're an old company. They have been in business for ages, and they innovate. Actually,
true.
I'm not saying they're always all that ethical, but that's a different question.
It's a global company. Sometimes ethics is different.
Exactly. So they do what they need to do for their shareholders, and let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, true.
So they developed a platform for this, a SaaS platform with major players in the SaaS market. Great, worked fine. But now we come to the difficult part.
Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. Support us by leaving a like or a review. You can always find more at ithorrorstories.eu, and we're just an email away at hello@ithorrorstories.eu.
We now return to our episode of today.
We were in the as I mentioned, we were in the EMEA region. Mm-hmm. Headquarters is in the US, so they had a region as well where their region covered Canada, the US, and Mexico, because South America was a different region.
Okay, yeah.
And they used that as a blueprint for the rest of the world. So they wanted us...
How American?
Yes. They wanted us to implement a system with the same configurations, with the same restrictions or lack thereof, as that they were doing in the US. In essence, what they meant was that all the sales material needed to be available for all the regions, which meant that somebody in the US could use the same sales material could use the sales material that was being used in Canada. Because why would you restrict that? When that was pitched initially, I raised a remark, not a complaint yet, just a remark, asking them, okay, guys, you do know that we have different laws in Europe. Part 1.
Yes, logically.
Part 2, which was for me a significantly more important part, but I know they tend to be a little bit more open towards legislation, so I opened with that. But part 2 was, we have countries in our region that are at war with each other.
Yes.
Do you really want to have those people have material available from those different countries. Yeah, no problem. It makes no sense. Just implement it exactly how how we have done it. We validated it. It works great. So implementation goes. After 9 months, it's live. It's being rolled out across the region. It was already rolled out in Europe. We were doing the rollout in Middle East and Northern Africa, and essentially the next phase would have been Middle Africa and the South of Africa.
Okay.
Phased rollout. You target the countries where you have the most volume that you're doing. All completely normal, all going to plan. Everybody's happy. Sales was ecstatic because, hey, less administration, less complaining. Great program. It was working perfectly fine. But then they decided to organize a very big sales conference for the entire region, and they decided to organize it in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken.
That's perfectly fine. Go to a seminar, go see a pyramid, have a sphinx.
Exactly.
Lovely. Yeah, good idea.
Lovely. It was. I think even it was at a retreat at the Red Sea. So.
Oh yeah, that little corner by the Red Sea where all the package holidays go.
Exactly. So perfect.
Scuba diving, yay!
Perfect. Until it wasn't, because the company also had had people in Israel. Now you need to know, around that time, the relations between Israel and Egypt were quite tense. At the time, everything was relatively smooth. They were just tense because of what happened. I think somewhere in the 80s or early 90s or even late 70s. Something happened around the deserts.
Someone in an office drew a line through the desert, and people have been discussing about that line in the desert for the last 80 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And stuff happened, and ever since it's been rather tense. But fair enough. Sales conference. It was a week-long sales conference. Started on Monday, ended on Friday, which meant that the commercial people flew in the Friday evening before and Saturday, so they had a few days off before the conference.
Yep.
And essentially they would have a few days off after the conference.
Okay, nothing that's unexpected for a conference that level and for that thing. Okay,
exactly. And business was going good. It's still going good for them, so why not? You have the budget, at least use it.
Yeah.
Which all culminated to me. At that particular moment, I was application manager, project manager. I wore a lot of hats, but essentially I was running the program without being a program manager.
We choose not to have any subscription model nor sponsoring in order to keep our stories accessible for each and everyone. To support us, please check our merchandise at shop.ithorrorstories.eu or buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com/ithorrorstories.
And I got a call, I think it was Saturday night. I was out and about having fun, not completely sober anymore, being honest.
Those are the best calls that you can
exactly.
get.
I think it was around 1:30, 2 o'clock at night, Saturday evening, when I got a call from the European CIO.
That's a phone number you don't want to see on your phone at 2:30 in the morning.
Exactly. Honestly, he was lucky that I picked up, because I didn't recognize the number. I didn't have him in my phone. I never spoke to the guy. I've heard of him, and I heard horror stories of him. Maybe an episode for another time, but still. And I got in a call. He introduced himself. I told him, okay, hang on. I need to leave the building because the music was blaring. Left the building. And he told me, "Yeah, hold on. I'm going to dial in the European CEO, and the global CIO in the call. We have a situation.
And one of your heads is the one that needs to fix it.
Yes. But they just told me we have a situation.
Oh dear.
At that moment, I was stone cold sober again.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Now, what happened? Salespeople from Israel left for Egypt, and I don't remember the exact details, but transferring confidential data between Israel and Egypt was a punishable offense. And it was punishable under some espionage law. So what had happened, those sales guys, either when trying to leave Israel or when trying to enter Egypt, and I think it was when trying to enter Egypt, they essentially were arrested, all of them, for espionage. Because they were trying to smuggle confidential data from Israel to Egypt, according to the local authorities. And why did this happen? Simply because as long as they were in Egypt, they still had access to the confidential data for those sales and promotional materials that were local to Israel, since there were no geo regions defined in the application as requested
One
by...
block and...
Yes,
Oh
as requested by our colleagues from the US. One region, one geographical region according to them, meaning no boundaries, meaning all data available for everyone. So that was a big issue. And they asked, okay, how can we resolve this?
Well, wait. And you said, let me dig up my diploma of international diplomatic relations.
That was something that I wanted to say, but I didn't.
How? Enlighten me.
How did I resolve it, or how did I restricted myself from making a snide remark like that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. As I said, I was stone cold sober, and three very high people who made more in an hour, I guess, or in a day than I made in my entire life up until that point. So it helps. It helps to keep the snide remarks to yourself then. But essentially, I had expected something like that to happen. Honestly, I can be a lot of things, but I try to foresee issues that might come back to me, where people then start shouting at me, fix them. The others that I don't have to fix, I care less about, but the ones where there's a risk that I need to fix them, I try to prepare the system with some backdoors or some best practices that resolve the shit for me at particular moments like that. And I have never ever in my life been so happy that I did that, and so grateful that I did that at that particular time. So essentially what I had done was that, first of all, I had an A configuration in the system and a B configuration. A configuration was how it was expected. One geographical region and full data transparency across the region. Configuration B was geographical regions per country, where from the moment you left your country, the system would automatically block all access to data that was not available in that country, and you would only use the local data. So the system would then connect to the platform and download the new local data, and you could use that. So pretty straightforward. It was exactly what the system was designed to do, so that was easy. The more tricky part, but luckily we had it, was that I configured at that moment a beta functionality which defined a life cycle for your data, which essentially every X amount of hours the system would connect to the platform and check whether your data was valid or not, and if it was no longer valid, it would be replaced with new data, or it would be just removed from the system. Or if it couldn't make access, the data would be purged from the system.
So like a dead man switch.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And I implemented. I know that the colleagues from the US didn't like it because why would you? But I got it to fly under the radar, under the umbrella of what if the device gets stolen by our competition, and for some reason we can't do a remote wipe because
Then, yeah.
because they make sure that it doesn't connect to the internet. So that was the excuse that I used.
So like, and that was on a local wipe.
It was a local
Okay,
wipe, so
on the tablet. Okay, yeah.
on the tablet, once you start the application or you try to access the application, it would do those checks, and if one of those checks wasn't valid,
Plop.
data was wiped, and you had a clean. You essentially had the only thing you had was the application and your profile that would connect to the system.
And then waiting for. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So all in all, pretty safe. So essentially, I got lucky. They got lucky. I connected at the time with my smartphone to the backend. I flipped the switch, making it to the local geographical configuration. And devices, once those people were arrested, it was over the weekend, luckily. So that meant that the investigation on their side only started on Monday.
And by then,
All the devices were wiped. So on Monday they were released. Monday morning they essentially were released because, again, I forgot, it's Egypt is a mostly Islamic country, so
Sunday is Monday.
Sunday is Monday,
Yep.
indeed. So on Sunday they discovered that the devices were empty,
Yeah.
that the charges wouldn't stick, and they were released Sunday evening, and they were able to attend the conference like nothing ever happened.
Were the people on the conference notified of all of this?
A few.
A few, yeah.
A few,
Right.
but
We're not gonna.
yeah, the event planners, the ones that were responsible for the conference, but most people attending the conference only knew once word got out when the people arrived.
Yeah.
But as far as they were concerned, they just hadn't arrived yet. That was it.
Yeah. It's like, how was your travel? Eventful.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Now, I must admit there was one thing that also saved all of our asses, was the fact we were using iPads. And at the time, I don't know. I'm not following that particular market all that much anymore. But essentially, at the time, there was a very big security discrepancy between iOS and Android. Android was at the time, or at least from my experience, pretty much as secure as a SIF. Essentially, you could do whatever you wanted with it, while the iOS devices, they were pretty tight. You had to have the right certificates. At the time they weren't hacked. There was no jailbreak available. All of those things. It was early days, so it hadn't had the same experience or exposure to the hacker community than maybe now. So that helped significantly with the fact that they couldn't get the data from those devices and the system actually worked as intended.
Okay, yeah.
But that was one of my more challenging stories, and I did stay with that company for a while after. I eventually left, nothing really to do with the company, more with the intermediary that was handling my contracts I had, and yeah, it was a shit long drive. Honestly, I was on the road daily because it was before you could work from home. It was an hour and a half, 2 hours one way that I had to do twice a day.
Yeah, I know which company it is. I know where they are located, and it is.
And
yep.
and I didn't live as close to them as I live now, so now it would have been different. But at the time, it was a horrendous commute.
It's still today. It's still a horrendous commute because there is no straight way there.
No.
It's
no, but if you only live half the distance, the commute also gets significantly closer.
I know that having worked for the same company, not at the same time, not at the same things. Many of the folks there is like, but no, why? I come in at 7 in the morning. I live 5 minutes from here. and they all think everybody lives 5 minutes from there.
Yeah.
Everybody in that place is like, oh no, we all live local. This entire city was built around this company. The entire region is built around this company. And how dare you live more than 10 minutes away? Why don't you move here? Well, I'm an external consultant. I'm not going to be here for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. And they even offered me to become an internal employee at the time.
Yeah.
And if I had known then what life would have thrown at me afterwards, honestly, I think I would have done it.
That would have been a
It's honestly at the time they were a very decent employer.
True. Back then they had a good reputation.
I don't know now anymore. I haven't been in contact with any of them, but decent employer, nice benefits, in a region where you could buy and rent relatively cheaply. So yes, you would have to up and move, but there were a lot of benefits, except then the distance from civilization afterwards.
Yeah, and you would get to go to the Red Sea every now and then.
Yes, indeed.
But going back, so that you said, the entire SASTing and tablets and then syncing. So basically you invented cloud storage and cloud computing there.
Yeah.
Because 15 years ago, storing things locally in a centralized environment, and then specifically the syncing on the fly.
Those practices,
I think you missed out on a few patents there.
Yeah, maybe. I've never been much of a researcher. I've been more of a
Are you too pragmatic solution thinking?
Yes, indeed. I'm more of a how do you say it? I have a lot of skills, but I'm a master of none. So
welcome to IT.
Exactly. So a lot of those best practices are purely from pragmatism. Yeah, having experience of what can go wrong. I've been involved in a lot of things where a lot of things went wrong, and trying to avoid those. And honestly, they were lucky to have had me on one hand, and I was lucky because my job before that, I actually designed an entire e-reader newspaper platform.
Okay.
To push digital newspapers to people early in the morning. So it was the same principles there. And that helped tremendously because...
And you took that experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
If I would not have had that experience, I would have never made the decisions that I made at the time to do it like that. And just for reference, when I was there at the company I worked before with the entire newspaper platform, digital newspaper platform, cloud did not exist.
No.
It didn't exist yet.
You would go into your data center. If you were lucky, you had a VPN.
Exactly.
You could do the... I wanted to circle back to one thing because you said, you got a phone call from a number you didn't know, and it says hey, this is the CIO Europe. You don't know me. Here's my name. If you would get a call today with all the cybersecurity going on, it says hi, it's 2:30 in the morning. This is the CIO. Listen to what I'm saying.
Then I would most likely say, okay, please dial in my boss.
Yeah.
So I know my boss. If you are the CIO, then you're his boss. Yep. So dial him in.
Yeah.
Or dial in somebody else that I know that can verify you.
And that it's your number.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, if they would dial me on my phone directly, most likely I would say, okay, hang up and dial me via Teams or the internal
you can see that
application. So I'm sure that it's you.
Yeah. 15 years ago, hi, it's your boss's boss's boss. How are you doing, sir?
Exactly.
This wouldn't fly anymore today. Well, it shouldn't fly anymore today.
Exactly. And 15 years ago, honestly, I knew the name. I knew of him by reputation. That helped.
Yeah.
In any case, what they were explaining to me, I had no idea how somebody else would know about that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That helped as well.
They were not calling you to reset their password.
No, exactly. They were saying, okay, we have a situation, this is happening, and honestly, even if a competitor would have said that, it wouldn't have benefited anybody.
True.
So there was a certain amount of, there were enough criteria and arguments for me to accept that it was a genuine call.
Yeah.
Especially at the time.
At the time with the info, then it makes... You do your internal sanity checks.
Exactly.
And it says, okay, fine. All right, fair enough. That's still a thing to that also came to mind when you went through the thing. Yeah, that's I've had some international politics levels, but not at that rate. So I'm good. Thanks for sharing. This is amazing.
Honestly, it was a one-off, and I'm happy it was a one-off.
Yeah, let's just keep it that way.
Exactly. I do have some international stories to tell, but and they are also horror stories, but more of trying to get things done.
It's like let's try to not have them include loaded firearms.
Yes, exactly.
All right, good. Bob, really thanks for sharing this. This was awesome. And so the global politics and IT horror stories, it's a mix. Lovely. I love it.
Yes, exactly. Nice being here again. And guys, if you want to hear more stories in a similar trend like these, I have plenty. So just let us know.
Yeah, well, we publish our new episodes in the beginning of every month. ithorrorstories.eu on all your regular platforms, so your Spotify's, your Apple's, your Deezer's, your YouTube's, and I'm forgetting 5 or 6 of them. So tune in, subscribe, like, notification bells, and all the yaya ding dongs you can think of. If you have any feedback, let us know. Our email address is hello@ithorrorstories.eu. We have a website, we have a merchandising shop, and we also accept your support on Ko-fi. All the links are on our website, ithorrorstories.eu. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see or listen to you in a month. Bye-bye.
Cheers, bye-bye.
This podcast features Jack Smith and guests. We say thank you to our demo scene friends who helped making this podcast possible. Commander Homer for editing, Danko for music and audio advice, NetPoet for additional voiceovers. The content of this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is meant to humorously explore various tech-related situations. Any resemblance to actual events or real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. We ridicule situations, never individuals or groups. Listener discretion is advised, and we encourage everyone to approach technology with a sense of humor and an open mind.